You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to give you the inspiration you need to get started in the outdoors or keep moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Adventure Sports Podcast. I have Rob Hutchins with us today, and this is a different sort of a sport than we have covered very much. We have had long-distance swimming before, but Rob does amazing long-distance swims, and in New Zealand, in Newfoundland, different places. He calls it marathon swimming, and it's just super cool. So we're going to dive right into that. Rob, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Well, Rob, first of all, where are you today?
I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand. That's where I've lived for the last just over 7 years. But I'm from Newfoundland in Canada.
So that's kind of the funny thing, because I could hear just a touch of New Zealand in your voice, but I knew it wasn't home because definitely not. So, and I do hear like that northeastern Canada in your voice too.
Yeah, I've lived around the world. I'm from Newfoundland. I've lived in England. That's where I did my education. My wife is Australian. I lived there for 15 years, and now we both have funny accents over on this side of the ditch, as we call it, the Tasman. But yeah, we've lived in New Zealand for just over 7 years.
I had a friend from Scotland who had been in the U.S. for so long that he said he goes back to Scotland and people make fun of him because of his U.S. accent. He's in the United States, people make fun of him because of his Scottish accent. It's like, you don't have a home anymore.
Yeah, my language is a bit messed up because I have slang language from several countries, and sometimes I don't even know which country anymore it comes from. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, what got you into swimming, first of all? Just in the very beginning, why swimming?
Well, when I was really young, I was always really, really athletic, active and, hyperactive and that sort of thing. But I wasn't any good at the conventional sports. Like, we had baseball, hockey, basketball in particular, that sort of stuff I tried. But if you put a ball in my hands or put a ball at my feet, nothing good is going to happen. And it took me a number of years to figure that out. So after failing miserably with basketball and baseball and a few of the other sports, I got into swimming. I started swimming just before I turned 13. And very quickly realized how much I loved it. I wasn't a natural swimmer. I was never became one of the top swimmers or anything like that. But after getting the coordination for learning how to do the stroke, I quickly realized I really love long distance stuff. And there was a triathlete who trained with the swim team. He was about nearly 5 years older than me. I was 13. He was 18. And I went up to him on the pool deck and told him I wanted to be a triathlete like him. And he took me under his wing. His name was Jamie Merrigan. And we're still friends. And he helped me learn how to train for long distance, swimming and triathlon. And in triathlon, swimming was always my strength. Like, I was a better swimmer than I was cyclist, certainly, and running, even though I, got better at those things as well. And the only natural athletic talent I seem to have is swimming in a straight line in the open water. Shortly after practicing,
that's hard to do, by the way.
Yeah, after practicing that for a while, a very short amount of time, I actually discovered I'm actually good at swimming in a straight line. And my swimming coach saw that I both loved open water swimming and triathlon, and she basically introduced marathon swimming to me, and she said, "You can do both sports. Let's get you into marathon swimming too." And it went from there.
Well, that's so cool. And by the way, I love swimming. And people that listen to the Adventure Sports Podcast are probably tired of me saying, "Oh, I love this, I love that, I love this." But I do. I'm no good at any of it. I just dabble in everything. But when I was in high school, I got a stress fracture running cross-country track. Mm-hmm. And so to train when I couldn't run, I went to the pool and started swimming laps. And then after that, I found that I really preferred open water. So we lived somewhat close to Tinkler Reservoir in northeastern Oklahoma. And my thing was to go out on the open water and just go. I just found that so fun. So I understand where you're coming from. It's a
Yeah.
unique experience.
Yeah, like open water swimming for me, I mean, it evolved into, I mean, first I was mostly competitive, and for quite a long time, both in triathlon and marathon swimming. But probably shortly before I moved to New Zealand, I realized I was not necessarily done with competition, but I was realizing I was liking the adventure stuff more.
Hmm.
And there's something very unique about adventure marathon swimming. Like I find it quite meditative. Um, I love the scenery and everything else, especially here in New Zealand. I mean, you can't really beat it. And there's always been something I've been able to get into, like a meditative state. That I do yoga as well as part of my training, and I mean, I'm quite a yoga enthusiast as well. But I've never been able to learn how to meditate like I imagine a Buddhist monk would be doing. So the closest I've ever gotten to what I imagine a monk would be doing when they're meditating is when I'm long distance marathon swimming.
Well, you've got the controlled breathing.
Yeah,
You've got the rhythmic nature of it, the smoothness, the floating. You're not even walking on ground, you're floating.
yeah,
And I get there whenever I do long swims, I come out the other side, I feel different.
yeah. No, it's an incredible feeling, and then like it's in the long smooth swims I get there, and then of course I do the rough water swimming. It's not quite the same meditative state when you're either in a river or in the surf swim, but in the long distance, the lakes and the when the ocean's calm, I can really get into the meditative state there.
Oh, that's cool. I got to tell one quick story because I think you'll find it hilarious. You've got a story about a cow that we're going to get to.
Yep.
I've got a story about some dogs.
Yep.
So I went out to Tin Killer to do one of my swims, and I decided to swim across a bay. And two Labradors were following me. I don't know why. But I jumped in the water to swim across this bay, and it wasn't a long swim, maybe a quarter mile, something like that. But I get out in the middle, I look behind me, and both of these Labradors are in the water with me. And one of them is like a 9-month-old pup, and the other one is its mom. The pup starts to panic. It starts to get tired and starts climbing on top of its mom. Of course, he's drowning his mother, right? And I'm like, oh, no. So I have to swim back to these dogs, and I grab the pup off of its mom, and I throw the pup as far as I can so that it'll have to swim back to us. And I'd swim a few strokes. She's right behind me, and then the pup catches up and starts drowning its mom again. I don't know how many laps I went back and forth throwing this puppy off of its mother because the puppy was strong enough to make it. I mean, it was going to be fine. It just didn't need to be climbing on top. Anyway, long story short, all three of us completed the swim. And I felt really glad that nobody, succumbed to the scenario. But man, that was exhausting and completely different than what I expected. It was not meditative, Rob. Not at all.
Not every swim is meditative, and there's always something weird that happens. But yeah, no, I mean, I've had other wildlife experiences in the water as well, and it some of them end up being very hilarious like that. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, so one thing I want to point out here, I grew up in Oklahoma. It is hot. In the summertime there, it is killer hot. And so the only way I could survive the heat, because I'm just not genetically predisposed for it, was to be in the water. So I was in the water all the time. I love the water, but you didn't grow up in a place like that. It's cold, buddy.
Yeah, well, it helps being genetically about 50 or 60% polar bear. And that's certainly me. Like I do well in the cold and in cooler temperatures. I mean, I lived in Australia for a long time, and my wife's Australian, but yeah, she's never been able to understand what minus 30 degrees means. And
right.
But I think it's getting hot when it's above 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. So,
well, and what is that in Fahrenheit? 7.
I can't
50?
speak. I can't speak Fahrenheit language, I'm afraid. But
I'm going to say it's roughly 50-ish. Yeah. I could do the conversion, but I'm not going to take the time. So these big swims, and first of all, where you are in New Zealand, I want people to know this because I think it's funny. For me, it's December the 23rd, but it's tomorrow where you are, which means it is Christmas Eve in New Zealand, and you're on the Adventure Sports Podcast.
That's right.
Well, thank you for doing this interview, even though I think Christmas Eve is such a special day. I really do. But I have a question about New Zealand. Now, how far south are you in New Zealand, and how cold is it there?
Well, I'm in Christchurch, which is about roughly midway down the South Island on the east coast. So you can go about I think Invercargill, the southern tip, is maybe about 6 hour drive south from here. That's the most southern tip of South Island.
Okay.
So yeah, it's about
So you're in the cooler part of New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, we have the mountain range here. Now, I mean, Christchurch can get warm in the summer. The weather's extremely variable because, it's a relatively small, narrow strip of land with a mountain range. And,
Right.
We got the Pacific on one side, we got the Tasman on the other side, and we have the Southern Ocean down bottom. So whenever the wind changes direction, I mean, several days back it was pushing 30 degrees, and I mean that by, Celsius, which is pretty warm. But the other day it was about 12 degrees because when the wind changes, it can be quite cool. So the weather does change quite unpredictably. We don't get snow on the ground that much in Christchurch in the winter, which is in July and August. And being Canadian, that always will seem weird to me.
Right.
So it does get cool. Like, I mean, you'll wear your puffer jacket and things like that. And, up in the mountains, so you can ski and, there's lots of snow up in the mountains. But at sea level in Christchurch, it's rare to get snow. It does happen, but it doesn't last very long. So
what about the water temperature where you swim, though?
Right now it's pleasant enough. Like, it's probably around 15, 16 degrees. And it will be for most of the summer. But I do some cold water swimming through the cooler months as well, and so the water temperature is not a problem in the ocean this time of year. The glacial lakes, they're always going to be cold.
Right.
A lot of the lakes that I swim across are glacial fed, and like I did a short swim, maybe about I think it was 9K. I did a double crossing of a 4.5K lake last weekend of October, and there was snow on the mountains directly next to it. I wore my thermal wetsuit. It was very cold. It was about, I'm going to say 6, maybe 7 degrees water temperature. 5 or 6 degrees, above freezing. So that was cold.
So. Wow. So it's funny that you're bringing this up. This summer, well, on the podcast, I was talking about doing snorkeling in rivers. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine said, okay, you do that, let's do that. So I got a wetsuit, but it's very, very thin. It's like 2 mil to 3 mil, depending on the part. But anyway, we went into snow-fed mountain lake at 10,000 feet and snorkeled there. And the wetsuit was just not enough. What you mentioned your thermal wetsuit. How thick is it?
I think it's about 4 mils, but it's got a thermal lining. I wear a wetsuit all the time, not for cold protection. Like I don't need the cold protection, but I'm a freckled redhead from Canada, and we're just not designed to live on the world's surface. We redheads, and I'm swimming is normally a sport where you're not wearing very much. But when I was competitive in marathon swimming, I wasn't wearing wetsuits, but I mean I couldn't deal with the sunburn.
Right.
So I wear a 2 mil wetsuit just for sun protection, and wetsuits can be, I won't use the word controversial, but when you're doing competitive things and when you're looking to set records on the recognized routes, I mean, wetsuits do offer a modest advantage, but I'm 50 years old. I'm not going to set any world records or anything like that, and I've had cancer once, so I don't want skin cancer. Oh. So I wear a thin wetsuit for in the summer simply for sun protection, and on a long swim I got to reapply sunscreen to my face and hands. Depending on how long it is, often 2-3 times.
Wow.
Because I am a redhead. So
well, let's talk about some of these swims so people know. These are not short swims; these are big swims, and So, first of all, you swam two different UNESCO World Heritage sites,
Yep.
and share with us what that is
Yep.
so that people have some context.
Well, the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I mean, basically, it's geological and aquatic. World. I mean, basically, they're very, very unique fjords. And in Milford Sound, New Zealand, is one of the iconic landmarks and of waterways in New Zealand. The Fjordland down in the southwest corner of South Island is. I mean, I'm not sure how many fjords there are, but there's dozens and dozens and dozens of fjords. And Milford Sound is basically considered the icon, and it's a World Heritage. It's a UNESCO World Heritage site. And I swam down in the fjords before, and normally there's a fair amount of boat traffic in Milford Sound. I mean, you can do long distance swim there, and people have swam there. Um, but there is a fair amount of boat traffic because it's a popular tourist site. But I did it just a handful of days before the borders reopened after the COVID lockdowns. And
Okay.
so I got the water taxi out to the end of the fjord where it meets the open ocean, and it's about 16 kilometers. And I swam back, and there was a couple of tour boats, but it was only domestic tourists. But I got to do it at a really unique time because, while I'm always happy to swim, and I mean, whenever I've done some long swims and tour boats go past, I mean, you get a little bit of a cheering squad. But it was even more peaceful than normal because there were I believe there were only two tour boats past me the whole time I was swimming, which took about 6 hours. So that was just a really special time, and I mean. There's this iconic peak called Mitre Peak that is just the most stunning looking mountain, with the backdrop of the water. And on a clear day like I had for Milford Sound, I was really, really lucky. I mean, the Fjordland can get drenched with rain, but I had the most beautiful day you could possibly imagine, where the water was just like a mirror. And the other thing that was special about Milford Sound is because it does get so much rain. It's a saltwater fjord, but there's so much rain draining off the mountains. You actually got about a meter and a half of a layer of fresh water on there. So I could mildly taste the salt. It was almost as if we were swimming through fresh water, but you're in the ocean.
Oh, that's crazy. So it's really kind
Yeah,
of brackish, mixed. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and yeah, that was one of the most. It had to be like one of the most incredible, beautiful swims I'd done to that point. And yeah, and I got out of the water having successfully done that, and I immediately thought I wanted to go back to Newfoundland, which I hadn't been to in a while, to swim Western Brook Pond, which I'm sure we'll get to because that's almost exactly the same size as Milford Sound, and it's the largest fresh. I'm told it's the largest freshwater fjord in North America.
Interesting. We'll come back to that because I do want to talk about it. But you just said 16 kilometers.
Yep.
That's a long distance,
Yeah.
and you're in Milford Sound. I guess I'm ready for the why question.
Yep.
You know,
Well,
why do you do it? What's the driver?
well, yeah, it does come to having this love of the open water, and very shortly after becoming a pool swimmer, when I was 13, I realized I liked the long distance stuff, and that started out as triathlon and kept up that, but then got into marathon swimming, and um, part of it's the feeling of freedom that I get in the open water. Um, I really love just being out there where you can switch off the busyness of the world. I really, really love just that meditative feeling that I often get to in the open water. And it's just a unique way of seeing, different parts of the environment that, it's not many other people get to see it that way. Like I'm told I'm the only person who swam the full length of Milford Sound. I know other people have swam there, like done, out and back swims a certain amount of distance, but it was just this very, very unique way of seeing such beautiful parts of the world. And you get interactions with the wildlife, like dolphins came up. 3 dolphins flanked me for several minutes. They must have thought I was a funny looking seal, I guess. And that they were playing around with me for several minutes while I was swimming in Milford, and that's happened in a few other spots. Had some interactions with dolphins, and it's just this really unique way of challenging yourself in different environments. I'll always love the feeling of pushing myself, and I love being in the water. And one of the ways I often have adventures is do a big marathon swim one day and next day go up a mountain, either hiking or trail running or something like that. So you get to both see the beautiful waterways and then get up and see it from the top on the mountains.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
I interviewed Epic Bill Bradley a few weeks ago, and his episode just came out actually fairly recently, but he's been working, I'm going to say it this way, working on the English Channel project. And I'm calling it that because he has multiple attempts, and he's trying again. But he described something, and I want to know if you've experienced this. He was in some really bad high seas. It was not a good time to be trying to swim. But he swam until he could no longer keep his feet at the surface. They started sinking deeper and deeper until he was fighting to keep his head above water just because of exhaustion. Have you ever been to that point in your swims?
I've had a few. The longest I swam is 33 kilometers, which took me a bit over 11 hours. I've definitely been completely exhausted several times. Most of the times where I've reached that absolute don't have another stroke or another step in me was in some triathlons. When I swam Lake Pukeki in April, that was 28 kilometers. That took me 8.5 hours. I was definitely cooked when I finished that. I haven't reached the point where my legs were sinking, but it does help having rather chunky, heavy legs that seem to float quite well.
Oh, there you
go. So yeah, I've experienced some pretty incredible states of fatigue in the open water, but I haven't got to the point where anyone's needed to pull me out for safety reasons. I've generally been able. The only few times I've had to be forced to abandon a swim is mostly due to weather. But I have gotten to those, absolutely finished fatigue states in, long distance triathlon and a few of the other backcountry expeditions I've done for sure.
So for the sake of the listening audience here, how do you do it safely? If you're doing a swim and you get to the point of exhaustion,
yep,
that could be dangerous. So
yeah,
what do you do for safety?
Well, with Milford Sound, I was with the water taxi. There's a Milford Sound track. It's a famous trail that starts next to the fjord and goes into the backcountry, and the water taxi takes you to the beginning of the trail. But since there weren't that many tourists around, I had the water taxi accompany me, and I had 2 friends kayaking with me. So what I often do, because I moved to New Zealand in my 40s and didn't know anybody, I just started using the Facebook group saying, hey, I want to do this swim. I'm looking for kayak support. And, I've always managed to find some kayakers, and sometimes there's a support boat depending on the size of the swim with me. Basically, if there's any trouble, the kayakers will pull me ashore. We have the little beacons. If we're somewhere really remote, the helicopter can come rescue if necessary.
Right.
That's never happened with me yet. I've always got someone with me. So usually I'm with 2 or 3 kayakers, and sometimes with a support boat as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I was just thinking about, someone thinking, that sounds like fun, and they jump in a body of water that's more than they really should take on, and they get, 3/4 of the way across. And I've been in some swims where I didn't have any support, and I thought, boy, if I overdid this, that could have a really bad finish. Have you ever gone through all the hassles of getting on the plane, security, luggage, long waits at the airport, all that kind of stuff, and then when you finally arrive at your destination, Not only are you worn out, but you also might feel a little bit disconnected. I know that I do when I hopscotch around the planet on a plane. That's one of the reasons why I love the great American road trips, where you get to drive from one place to another and connect all of those dots. You get to experience the changes in the terrain and the weather and the people and the communities. This is one reason that I am excited to present to you our new sponsor, Outdoorsy. Outdoorsy offers a different way to travel. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and turn the drive into part of the vacation on your schedule with your people and with way more flexibility. Listen, most trips focus on getting somewhere. Outdoorsy is about the part in between. With Outdoorsy, you can rent an RV or a camper and travel on your own terms. No TSA lines, no strict schedules, no rushing through airports. And for extra convenience, Outdoorsy even offers RV delivery and setup in many locations, so you can enjoy the experience without having to worry about the logistics. Outdoorsy connects travelers with trusted RV owners across the country, making it easy to find a rig that fits your style and budget, and I might add, that also fits with the people and the pets that you want to take with you. So when you're ready for a trip that actually feels like a break, head to Outdoorsy.com. Outdoorsy is currently running a special promotion for listeners. Use the promo code ASP at checkout to take advantage of this limited time offer. That's Outdoorsy.com, promo code ASP.
Well, the closest I've come to, I wouldn't say it was dangerous. Like when I started Milford Sound, there's the point where it meets the open ocean, and I was just looking at the map. I said, right, I'll start from there. I'll make sure I'm swimming with the tide because you can't go against the tide. Michael Phelps couldn't go against the tide, and he's faster than me. Basically, there's a current that I didn't know about. Now, I asked the water taxi guy who basically lives down there, and he was a pretty introverted guy, and he didn't tell me about this current. And basically, Milford Sound is actually about a little over 16K, and I jumped in the water right where the water meets the open ocean. And I realized, maybe half hour into the swim that I wasn't going anywhere. And I was thinking, geez, did I triple checked the tide, and I thought I must be going against the tide. I must have got this wrong somehow, even though I checked and checked and checked again and checked again. And anyway, I was like, I'm not going anywhere. There's no way this is ever going to happen. And my kayakers were having trouble moving as well. And we went back to the boat, and I got back on the boat, and I was frustrated because, it was a long way to get there. And I thought,
right.
It's over half hour, 40 minutes in. And the support guy, he was a pretty quiet guy, and he just said, oh, yeah, there's this big outgoing current. If we go 1K in or so, the current's not there, and it should be pretty calm. And I was like, and he even clarified, he said there were 2 elite level kayakers. I don't know if you ever heard of the Coast to Coast race in New Zealand. But 2 guys who were former champions of the Coast to Coast, a couple of weeks prior, they tried to kayak out Doubtful Sound, which is, a fjord not too far from Milford, and out around in the ocean, and then come back into Milford. And 2 elite level kayakers couldn't beat this current. They had to turn around and go back into Doubtful. And of course,
wow.
Any competent kayaker is going to be much faster than the swimmer, and they couldn't beat it. And I was like, oh, why didn't you just tell me that? I would have just started, And anyway, we got in the boat, and we went in, and I think it was about 800 meters into the fjord. And I jumped in, and the water was smooth, and the swim went fine from there. But,
wow.
I very specifically asked him, and like, is there anything I should know that I don't know? And he didn't tell me, and he goes, oh, yeah, there's a big current there. There's no way you're ever going to beat that. And I was like, oh, okay. Thanks for telling me. But made for a funny story.
Well, it's a great place to train. You could just stay in one place like a treadmill.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was very, very fortunate that, I had the support there because, if he just left me out there with kayakers, we would have been finished.
That's crazy.
But it was not good in the moment, but it ended up being a funny part of the story. But the rest of the swim was very, very smooth, and we didn't have any problems. And but because I spent about half hour or so fighting a current that I was never going to beat, just as I was finishing the swim, maybe 20 minutes, the tide shifted. So the last 700 or 800 meters of the swim, I actually had to fight the tide just as it shifted. So normally I'd get through 700 or 800 meters in less than 10 minutes. But that took almost half an hour to get that last bit.
Wow.
So there's always something unexpected and weird that happens almost always in my marathon swims. It never quite goes according to plan.
Well, we've probably said this 100 times on this show, but the adventure begins when the unexpected thing does happen. It's when the plans don't turn out the way, what you planned doesn't, the reality doesn't turn out the way you planned. And
Yep.
But that's what makes the story interesting too.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I'm writing about it. I'm going to have a swing at writing another book, and I wrote about Milford Sound, and that was just one of those things that life just doesn't go according to plan. I mean, it's important to make the plans and the safety plans and all that sort of thing when you're in any kind of adventure, but
right,
you got to be adaptable and be able to keep going when things don't go according to plan.
Well, I want to talk about some of these other big swims that you've done, but first, you're a healthcare professional.
I am, yep.
What does swimming do for people as far as health is concerned?
Well, there's a lot of things it can do, and there's been a lot of relatively recent research on cold water immersion, both just simple immersion and also, swimming in relatively cool water. That's they found that's really, really calming effects on the nerve system and really an immune system boost. Now, purely for joints, swimming, can be really, really good for, most of your joints and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's no impact or anything like that. So,
right.
Swimming is one of the things that can be really, really good for injury rehab. Like if you're not a swimmer, but you've injured yourself in some other way, swimming can be incredible for rehab. Both just the action of being in the water with some resistance, but not very much, and really helps improve range of motion, things like that. So for injuries to the, any leg injury, spinal injury, and, once we get a shoulder injury, rehab to the point where you can start doing the stroke properly again. Swimming is one of the better things you can do for many, many types of injuries. And, of course, as I said, good for the immune system and good for the nerve system as well.
What about lung capacity and cardio?
Well, I've always found obviously there's no real hills in swimming, so I've always been able to get my heart rate up a little higher, going up mountains and hills either on foot or on my bike. And swimming fitness doesn't really translate into cycling fitness or running fitness that well. It's just a different way of working your cardio system because, obviously you're horizontal, where on your bike or when you're on foot, you're upright. And most of it comes from your arms. So even the best swimmers, you're just not going to quite get the same. It's a different feeling. You can work exceptionally hard to, and get your heart rate up exceptionally high, but it's just a little different when you're aiming for speed work or racing and that sort of thing in swimming. My competitive days are mostly in the past, but and most of my swimming now is I do speed work in the pool and I do speed work around buoy lines, but most of the time I'm working hard, but not really hammering unless I'm in a 10K race or something like that. Because most of my adventure marathon swims, I'm aiming to challenge myself, but also making sure I've taken the time to really, soak up the scenery, so to speak. Like 2 or 3 times in Milford Sound, I just had to stop, lie on my back, and just look around and just appreciate what nature had in front of me. We're in a race. In a race, you're not going to do that, but in these sorts of long distance swims that I do, it's still obviously an endurance challenge, but working hard, but generally speaking, not hammering in these big ones. I do that in training sometimes, but when I go on these adventures, I would, me personally, I definitely find climbing up a mountain harder than marathon swimming. Um, it's harder cardio, at least for me. Um, but it's still extremely challenging in a different way.
Hmm. You must have a very efficient, smooth stroke.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think so. It's one of I mean, I wasn't natural at it. It took me I would say a good 4, 5, 6 months when I first started swimming to be able to do it well. It didn't come naturally to me, but because I got into long distance things pretty early in my sporting endeavors, you learn to be smooth and efficient, and it is one of those things you can only become more efficient by doing it. I mean, it's very efficient, and I breathe to both sides. Like I'll either breathe every third stroke or fifth stroke, so it's symmetrical. Because if you only breathe to the one side, you can develop an imbalance, which often can
Yeah.
lead to an injury. So yeah,
So you have to choose an odd number of strokes for your breath so you alternate.
yeah. Like
Um,
if you're going hard, you'll have to probably breathe every 3 strokes. But when I'm in a rhythm, I'll often breathe every 5, except for when you look up to make sure you're swimming in a straight line. So that happens every 20 to 30 strokes. Yeah.
well, swimming in a straight line is tough. I think water is disorienting to start with. Limited visibility. You have the water pushing you around. And in a pool, at least you have the line on the bottom to help you,
Yeah.
keep you in your lane, so to speak. But how do you navigate so you're in a straight line?
Well, it's. I mean, if there's no wind or no currents going on, it is easier, and you pick a point. If you can see the other side of the lake or something like that, you just pick a point and you say, right, I'm swimming towards that, and you basically every 20 or 30 strokes, or maybe a bit less than that sometimes, depending on what the weather's doing, you look up and make sure you're still heading towards it. Now, if you got tides to deal with, or if you have winds, like whether it's a headwind, it's harder when it's a crosswind. Um, but it takes a lot of experience, and like I said, the only natural athletic ability I seem to have is to be able to swim in a straight line, and navigating and knowing, being able to judge. If I've got a crosswind, for example, and you got to swim, just say to your right
Yeah.
somewhat in order to go straight. That's the one of the very few things that came naturally to me athletically. I just figured out how to navigate. This is how far I need to push to the right in order to keep going straight when the wind's coming to the. And of course, in the ocean, when it's surf conditions, it's harder. But yeah, I seem to be able to navigate the surf reasonably well. I mean, sometimes when the waves hit, you are going to be pushed to the side, but you quickly self-correct. And then, of course, there's rivers where I mean, you have to switch directions, and you have to dodge rocks, and you have to
Right.
dodge, swim around islands, that sort of thing, and you have to go through rapids. So that's a different beast altogether.
Oh man! And the name of your first book, by the way, it's Downriver Nomad. So I want to talk about swimming rivers. Let's get through a few more of the big swim events that you've done. Um, Western Brook Pond in
Yep.
Canada, and you were saying that they call it a pond, but it's actually the biggest freshwater fjord. it's
Yeah, where I'm from in Newfoundland, we call the big lakes the ponds. It doesn't make much sense, but that's what we call them.
right.
So Western Brook Pond, or to make it easier, Western Brook Fjord. It's almost exactly. I measured. It's actually about 200 meters longer than Milford Sound.
Oh wow.
And when I finished Milford, I hadn't been home for a fair while. And when I finished Milford, I thought to myself, "Huh, there's a fjord, 90 minutes from where I grew up. That when I was swimming and being competitive there, I never thought of swimming it. Like I was more of a competitor when I was a teenager and 20-year-old growing up in Newfoundland. And I wasn't doing as much adventure stuff, long distance triathlon for the most part, as well as marathon swimming. But I got out of Milford, and within several minutes, I thought I got to get back to Newfoundland and swim Western Brook Pond. Um, And this was 2022 when I swam Milford Sound. And just several months later, I found a lump on my foot, which turned out to be cancerous.
Mm.
So my plan of swimming Western Brook Pond in 2023 went out the window because I was recovering from the pretty horrific foot surgery, and it was right on the bottom of my left arch. And I thought initially that would be a relatively simple thing to remove, but because it was attached to my skin, they actually had to take skin off my forearm. If you don't know if you can see that funny looking scar there.
Yep. Yep.
Basically, they had to dig right down, take all the flesh off my left forearm, and slap it on the bottom of my foot. So I have hair on my forearms, and so now I actually have hair on the bottom of my left foot. And some of my North American friends, they said, "Oh, you're a hobbit now," because I live in New Zealand. And I
Yes.
had to correct them. I said, no, hobbits have hair on the top of both
On the
feet. I
top.
have hair on the bottom of one. So basically, it took me about several months to recover from that surgery. Had to learn to walk again in yoga, and then when the wounds healed, swimming was my important rehab. But because they more or less had to take this skin off my arm, I thought that I might be able to swim both Western Brook Pond, and my other big goal was Lake Pukeki. Several months before I swam Milford Sound, 28K lake, about halfway down the center of South Island, about a 3 hour drive from here. I tried to swim that a few months before Milford, but I got 21 of 28K across, but the weather turned on me. So I said, right, I'll try again next year. I was laid up with cancer. I missed the 2023 summer season because the summer is, basically December through to April here. And I had my surgery in January, so I didn't do anything swimming wise in 2023 during the summer season. And then in 2024, I wanted to swim Lake Pukeki, and I thought I'd go to Western Brook Pond. But I realized after I swam another lake called Lake Coleridge, which takes me about 4 or 5 hours to swim, that was my limit. Because my arm was still too damaged. I had my arm taped up, and I had neoprene wrist braces on my arm. And I realized if I swam another stroke after that, my arm would get badly injured. So 2024, I did swim and I did do a lot of things, but the longest I swam there was this particular lake called Lake Coleridge, which took me about 4.5, I think it was 4 hours 45, if I remember correctly. And so finally this year, 2025, in April, I swam the 28 kilometer Lake Pukeki. I caught the best possible day you could possibly imagine, where this ice blue glacial lake was like a mirror.
Oh, wow.
I look at that as the universe apologizing to me for the delay or something like that. Where I mean, Lake Pukeki can get pretty rough. It's a big lake, and when the winds pick up, as they often do in New Zealand, it can look like a mirror in the morning, but 2-3 hours into the day, it's often pretty rough.
Right.
But I had the best possible imaginable day, April 5th of this year, where the lake was like an absolute blue mirror. And that took me 8.5 hours, 8 hours 24. And I finally finished it. And there were some people milling about there's a lookout point where I finished. And my kayakers, they paddled in, and I had a support car driver because there's a road next to one side of the lake. And they told the few people milling about at this lookout point what I was up to, because they all saw me coming. And I was sitting down on this rock. I mean, I was finished. Like I was absolutely cooked. And I sat down on this rock, and this old lady who looked to be about 90 years old, and she was nearly as big as a puppy. She came up to me and put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "My goodness, swimming from the other side of the lake, that must have taken almost an hour." Despite being absolutely fatigued, I just burst out laughing because it did take more than an hour. It took 8.5 of them.
Right.
But yeah, so I finally achieved that goal in April, and then I moved on. In August, I went home to Newfoundland Just as I was turning 50. I turned 50 a few days after I successfully swam Western Brook Pond. And it's this isolated fjord, about 90-minute drive from where I grew up. So as I said, I never thought of swimming it when I was young and in my athletic prime. So my master genius plan was to wait till I turned 50 and then travel to the other side of the world, then go swim it.
Right.
It wasn't the most efficient way of doing it when you think about it. But it's a pretty isolated fjord. You got to walk. I believe it's about a 3 or 4 kilometer walk to get in there. And we pulled the kayaks in the night before on a quad bike. And yeah, like there's a tour boat that goes in there. And it was quite a difficult task to get permission to swim the fjord. Like when I asked permission from what's called the Department of Conservation dock in New Zealand, I sent the guy an email with my plan and my safety plan and my pledge that I wouldn't do it in bad weather. And he called me back about 3 hours later. We discussed it for a couple of minutes. He goes, "Yep, you got your permission." He sent me the letter. Go for your life. It wasn't quite as efficient in Canada. It was back and forth, and literally
Really?
literally right up until the day before, they were throwing roadblocks there. Like I'd sent a few days before I flew there to Canada from New Zealand. I'd sent a post out on the Newfoundland kayaking Facebook page saying, "Look, I've got a couple of kayakers, but if there's anyone who wants to kayak with me, I mean, I'd welcome more support and all that sort of stuff." And someone from Parks Canada got wind of that post. And when I landed in San Francisco, I just happened to open my email. I'm halfway to Canada. And they sent me an email saying, "You've now made this a public event by asking for help publicly.
Oh,
You need a
no.
$5 million insurance policy." And I was like, "What the?" I couldn't
Oh,
believe it.
no.
I thought I'd blew it. And anyway, this 2-page letter that it sounded pretty threatening, and I thought to myself, "Man, if I'd posted saying something like I want to sell drugs or something in the national park, I would have been just as threatened by Parks Canada."
Right.
And anyway, the last 2 lines were saying, "If you remove the post and publicly say um, I don't need extra help, then you can go ahead and swim." I was like, "Whew, phew," and I did that. And anyway, but it
This
was a
kind
bit
of
of
stuff is so perplexing. I mean,
yeah,
for a novice like me, I would think you just go jump in the water and swim. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well, this, as I said, it's in a national park called Grossmore National Park in Newfoundland, which is
Yeah.
really, really beautiful place. And anyway, the day before my swim, they sent me a letter saying, because we were going into the fjord, which was the direction the wind was forecast to be blowing, and I was going to get the shuttle boat which drops hikers off at the
Yeah.
end of the fjord. They sent me a message saying, "Nope, you can't do it because by putting the kayaks on the shuttle boat, you might damage the shuttle boat." And I
Oh,
was like,
goodness.
this was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the day before my swim. And I've got a friend who's a very successful businessman. He's one of the one of the great, he's a great guy. He really helped with the local triathlon and cross country ski trails there. I called him and I said, "Do you know anyone up there who can just get them to back off?" And he said, "Give me 10 minutes." He called me back in 8 minutes. He said, "You're good to go. I solved this problem."
Wow.
And this, so yeah, he basically was the one. His name is Bill Barry. He was the one who got me over the line to be able to finally swim Western Brook. And yeah, it's 16 kilometers plus 200 meters. And had two friends who were kayaking in with me. And the tour boat passed me 2 or 3 times. And just as I finished, the tour boat came up another time right at the end of the fjord. And this is a really, really isolated place. And I was on this small jetty where they drop off hikers. And the tour boat, I heard the tour boat operator with this Newfoundland accent, way thicker than mine. He was talking to the tourists, and he said, "See that guy on the wharf over there, fellas? Not one word of a lie. He swam all the way in here. First person to ever do that. I guess he thought the tour boat was too expensive. So yeah,
Oh, that's
that's what
fun.
happened. And Western Brook Pond is, as I said, it's the really large freshwater fjord, and that rivaled Milford Sound in beauty. So that was really,
Nice.
and it's an UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. So I was really, really stoked to finally get that one done.
I want to rewind just a little bit. You said you had the cancer and all the time and energy and work it took to come back from that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would just get knocked down and say, okay, I guess I'm not doing this anymore. But you came back. How did it feel when you did finish the swim and you were like, okay, I'm back?
Yeah, well, I don't remember this because I was coming out of anesthesia. But my wife told me that when I was being wheeled to the recovery room, and I was talking to the people who were. I have no memory of this because I was still with
Right.
anesthesia. I said to apparently the people who were wheeling me back, I was talking incessantly about triathlon and marathon swimming, and I said, right. Give me a year. I'm going to swim Lake Pukeki, and I'm going to get up Avalanche Peak again. And Avalanche Peak is one of the iconic mountains, about a 2-hour drive from here, in a place called Arthur's Pass National Park. And it was 4 days shy of a year. I made it up, made it up Avalanche Peak, and it took longer to swim Lake Pukeki because, as I said, my arm was so badly damaged
Right.
with the skin transplant. I did make it across Lake Coleridge that season, but it took me, well, basically a year and a half, and I got Lake Pukeki done. And when I finished this fjord swim in Canada in August, it was just like, wow, yeah, I'm gonna write another book about this. And I took a swing at writing a book after I swam what's called the Clutha River, and that was documenting my marathon swimming adventures and triathlon adventures around the world, culminating with the 256-kilometer Clutha River swim, which took 4.5 days. And that was my lockdown project because I decided on the second day of lockdown, when I realized they weren't kidding. Well, I've always wanted to write a book. My mom's an English teacher. I love writing. I love reading. I love reading adventure biographies. And my barrier to doing that before was, well, I'm not a super adventurer, and the only people who know me are people who've met me, who would read about me. But I realized with marathon swimming and triathlon, I was never the best one in the world or anything. I'm doing this because I love to and I want to, and I always wanted to write a book, so why not?
Oh,
So I
that's
thought I'd write
great.
another one. And what I'm hoping to capture in the book, coming back to your question, is how it felt to have that. It was a life-threatening cancer. I mean, it had it spread. They said that would have been it. But I just had the attitude, as best I could, that one of the first things I did when I recovered from when I got out of the hospital was basically saying, right, this sucks. What can I do to make this worse? And I made a list of things that I could do to make
Mm.
it incredibly worse and harder for my wife and harder for everyone around me. And I decided very clearly not to do all those things. And basically, it was, I was doing I had my left arm and my left leg, my left foot torn up. So I was doing all the movements that I could as early as possible, and then, um, you know, it was mostly yoga first because the wounds, I couldn't get in the water because I was had the wounds and stitches
Sure.
and
Yeah.
everything. It was mostly yoga that I was doing, and when possible, I got on my wind trainer. I remember the first time I got on my wind trainer. I did a 10-minute ride before my foot swelled up too much so that I couldn't ride anymore, and that 10-minute
Oh,
bike ride in my garage, um, that felt amazing, even though it was 10 minutes, and
right.
my foot hurt so much I could manage 10 minutes. And then when I finished Pukeki, and and I was sitting there exhausted, that little old lady came up to me, and I laughed, and then I thought about it some more, and I thought, wow, um, I'm not going to set any marathon swimming world records or triathlon world records or anything like that. And there's certainly people a lot, tougher than and faster than me. But what I'm hoping to capture in writing about my thing is capture what I've come to phrase as like a mode of being, where you have a challenge, you have I guess you could use the word catastrophe, and what you do in the face of that, and
Right.
and sure, there's appropriate amounts of times of frustration and all that sort of thing, but you just never let that get the better of you, and keep going no matter what. And that's what I'm
Yes.
hoping to capture in this book. That I'm, it's probably going to take me all this coming year to finish writing and that sort of thing. I've started, but I don't have a lockdown to do a lot of the work, and I work full time and I do a lot of adventuring. So it's not as many hours per week writing, but however long it takes, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, congratulations, and I love the example, getting after it, saying, "Okay, I got to figure out how to get back on the horse again."
Mm.
I believe that really is the way that it's the right attitude to get through life, because everybody gets hit with unexpected things. It may not be cancer, it could be any number of things, but we always end up with challenges and things we have to overcome that we wouldn't choose.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
your example's fantastic. It's like, okay, I'm back at it. I'm just going to make this happen. And you did. So
Yeah.
congratulations on
Well,
that.
thank you.
We've almost burned up all of our time, but I want to hear about the Buller River Gorge and the cow that
Yes.
outdid you.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Well, there's in the lead up to swimming the Clutha, like there's a handful of rivers in New Zealand that are deep enough for swimming, and the Buller River is one of them. Like most of the rivers in New Zealand are just too shallow for swimming. I mean, it's not a swimming place. But the Buller River, which the first time I saw it was just after finishing a backcountry mountain bike ride called the Old Ghost Road, which is incredible. And the shuttle bringing me back from the end of the Ghost Road back to where my car was, you go through the Buller River Gorge. And that was the
Okay.
first time I saw the Buller River. And I said, okay, I'm going to swim there. And basically, the first time I swam it, I didn't know all the kayakers that I know now, and I had the kayaking tour company in a small town called Murchison, which is on the Buller River. I said, right, what I want to do is I want to have a kayak tour guide come with me, but I don't want to use a kayak. And they're like, yeah, sure, okay. Um, and they thought, with my accent, I was the dumbest tourist who ever called.
Uh,
But I told them what I was up to, and basically what we determined was just around Murchison, there's a few waterfalls and that sort of thing, so you can't swim there. And the end of the river, where it meets the open ocean in a town called Westport, there's a bunch of farms, and I was advised that the water was with the farm runoff. Probably you get sick
yeah, I don't want to
swimming
do
that.
that.
So the Buller River Gorge is very coincidentally 42 kilometers long, marathon. And So I said, right, I'll swim that section from the beginning to the end of the gorge, and I did that successfully the first time when the water level was reasonably low, and that took about 7 hours. The second time I did it, the water level was quite high, and it took me about 5.5 hours.
Wow.
And the second time I did it, a local journalist in Westport, and this is population, I believe it's around 4,000, might be 5,000 people live in Westport, so, relatively small town. And a local journalist in Westport got wind of, what I'd done, and she called me and said, can I write a little story about this? And I said yes, and I told her all the things. I didn't swim above Murchison because there's too many rocks and there's waterfalls, so I declared that unswimmable. And I said no, I wouldn't swim below the gorge because of the farm runoff and didn't want to get sick. And she wrote a little story about me swimming the Boulder River Gorge twice. And at that time, a friend of mine has since swam it, but at that time I was the only person who'd done it. And less than 2 weeks later, I just came up on my Facebook feed. Funny how the algorithm works, but the same journalist wrote an article. They found a cow in the mouth of the river, and they fished the cow out of it. And by its tags that they had on, the brand or whatever it is, they worked out that the cow had fallen in the river from a field about 80 kilometers above Murchison. So the cow basically got drifted down the whole river right to the mouth and went over waterfalls. And a vet had examined the cow and said it was fine. So a cow did what I said couldn't be done. And so at the time, I was the only marathon swimmer in the world to have swam the Buller River Gorge, and I may still be the only marathon swimmer in the world who's been beaten by a cow.
If the cow had to do it again, it may not turn out so well for it. I think that's hilarious, though. I tell you, animals will do things that seem ridiculous and get away with it somehow. I think they're just tough.
Yeah.
Something about it. They're just tough. And I imagine a lot of cattle have died, not trying, but died in similar circumstances. So
I'm sure they have. But it was literally the same journalist less than 2 weeks later after I'd said to this journal specifically that what the cow did couldn't be done. So, yeah.
Well, that's a fun place to wrap this up. What's on the horizon for you? What are you looking forward to now?
Well, I've after my Western Brook Pond swim, 4 days later I swam the Humber River, which is roughly the size of the Upper Clutha. It's about close to 40 kilometers long. That's the river that
Wow.
That goes through my hometown. I swam that 4 days after, and very shortly after finishing those swims, I figured out how to injure my shoulder. I was helping my kayaker get the kayak out of the water, and I literally tripped on a very, very small piece of wood on the jetty, and I injured my shoulder. So September of this year, I was rehabbing. I didn't injure my shoulder during the swim. I figured out how to do it 5 minutes after.
Right.
So October was not the greatest training. I mean, I've had a lot of trouble getting back in shape, but there's what I'm going to do this year. I'm doing some big bike rides as well as backcountry swims. I'm going to swim that Lake Coleridge again. And my main thing that I've got in mind, there's a funny looking peninsula just near Christchurch called the Banks Peninsula. And there's several little bays along that. And I'm going to swim from what's called O'Kane's Bay through to Le Bon's Bay. So basically swim out to the open ocean through a harbor, out around this peninsula, which is basically a bunch of cliffs, and then swim back down into Le Bon's Bay. And that, crudely measured on Google Map, looks to be 16 or 17K. And I'm going to do another river swim, and really locally, I haven't done this yet, where the Wymack River, that's the river they use in the coast to coast for the kayaking section. I have swam that gorge as well. Big sections of that river are too shallow for swimming, but near the end, several kilometers where it goes into the ocean, just a little bit of north of Christchurch, I'm going to swim the end of that river and then enter the ocean and then swim down to the end of the beach in a little section of Christchurch called Sumner, and that looks to be about 25K, including a few K in the river. So transfer from river down into ocean. So that's one of the goals I have as well. And I'm cooking up some backcountry stuff like, combining pulling a raft with all my hiking gear, going into the backcountry and things like that. I did one of those adventures in March as well. I swam a lake, 12K, hiked up a big mountain, and hiked back down over 4 days, and then swam the 7.5K lake. And that was in Nelson Lakes National Park. And Mount Angelus was the mountain I hiked up, so I called that the Marathon Swimming Mount Angelus Sandwich. So I'm interested in combining marathon swimming with the mountains because I love swimming, but I also love the mountains. So combining the two is some of the other adventures that I've got in mind like that.
Rob, that is so fun. I think it's fantastic when people kind of come up with their own thing. They know they love it and they do it, and there aren't a lot of people doing what you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they're swimmers. but towing a raft behind you so you can camp and climb a mountain and swim back out again, that's unique. That's very, very cool. Well, thank you for your time today, Rob. It was fun to hear what you're up to. And congratulations again on beating the cancer and coming back and continuing to live an adventurous life.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, yeah, it's been fun. So all you listeners out there, as always, make sure you get out there and have your own fun.